Hello, the purpose of this screencast is to discuss Manifest Destiny. And the first instruction is to create a new notes page, and the purpose of that notes page is Manifest Destiny, and if you recall, all notes pages are on the right. This will probably take 2 pages of notes, so be prepared to have 2 pages of notes on the right side. Both the purpose is Manifest Destiny. Other reminders. Pause throughout the video to make sure you get all the key ideas. Listen to everything I have to say because I add information to the notes to provide context and to make things make sense. Use outline form, and this is the form we're using. There's a big Roman numeral, an uppercase A. Details are lowercase a, b, and c, and then another uppercase B when you go on to the next subtopic. Paraphrase, meaning use 6th grade words, not my fancy language. And shorthand, NA, the acronym for maybe Native American. Use plus signs, equal signs, arrows pointing up, down, left, right in order to indicate things. It allows you to move faster, and it's great practice for the future. All right, let's get started. So Manifest Destiny. In class, we will go over this painting. If you want to take a closer look at it, pause and look at the details of it. During class, I'm going to ask you who is America's most influential president. Not the best, not the most important, but the most influential, because I nominate James J. Polk. A lot of you might have a question mark over your head right now. Who is that? Let's get started with the notes. Uppercase, Roman numeral 1, impacts of War of 1812. Quick review. War of 1812 is about 30 years after the Revolutionary War. So America was its own country, the United States, and it went to war again with Great Britain. And America won, and they were able to remove Great Britain from large portions of North America, and as a result, started to become and feel like an independent nation. So the War of 1812 between the U.S. and Great Britain resulted in, this is going to be the starter to all the notes. So don't write this down every single time. Maybe just write it once because you know it's going to start each subtopic. So the War of 1812 between the United States and Great Britain resulted in uppercase A, economic independence for America. No longer was America tied or dependent on Great Britain for its economy or making money. It was going to start producing things on its own, mining for minerals on its own. When it would harvest crops from the fields, it would produce that on its own. When it would create textiles or anything that's made out of cotton, they wouldn't send it back to England. Rather, they would create their own textile mills and create that, turn that cotton into goods on their own. So, another result of that is lowercase a, America takes over the fur trade. This is a huge event because now only American citizens can be part of the fur trade. And that means the exchange of goods. So native groups, various Native American tribes, are no longer trading with the British for goods. They're no longer able to take part in the fur trade. They can no longer use furs as currency to get the things that they need. And as a result, all they have left to give is land. Whereas the British formally were interested in getting those furs from the native people. But America now has its own fur trappers, and those fur trappers are getting paid money, more like a wage, and they have a different system that they've set up that has cut out Native American groups. Uppercase B. The War of 1812 resulted in an era of good feeling. And this was just increased patriotism and unity. So you just beat Britain for the second time, you're patriotic, you're feeling good about your country, and you feel like you're all unified and together as one nation. Not these different regions or different colonies, but we're all one. So lowercase a, citizens felt like Americans for the first time. Not colonists, but Americans. And Native Americans did not fit this vision of what it was to be an American. Uppercase C, a desire to expand. So, War of 1812 resulted in a desire to expand west. So moving into the territories that were occupied by native people for thousands of years, but the U.S. government looked at that land as resources and ways to make money and places for people to move on to, white people, that is, for the most part. So U.S. government wants land belonging to native people, and the U.S. prepared to remove native tribes that are in the way of expansion. So if that Native American tribe is unwilling to move, they will use various means necessary to do so. This is the U.S. government. Sometimes through treaties, which you can see is relatively peaceful, and sometimes through violence. So the War of 1812 had a large impact, especially on Native people. And largely it was a negative impact. Manifest Destiny is Roman numeral 2. And this is Mr. Polk right here, the guy who I nominate as the most influential president. This is what the United States looked like around the time that he became president. So 1840s. And we'll talk more about this map in a sec. So Manifest Destiny, this is the starter to all the notes. It will start each one. You can maybe use the acronym MD as a shorthand. So Manifest Destiny is an idea that the United States was destined to span the continent from the Atlantic, over here, to the Pacific, over here, and from Canada, up here, to Mexico, down here. So it's this idea that Americans and the U.S. government were destined to take over this whole land that I'm circling right now. In 1840, you can just see the parts in white that were actually occupied or owned, and I put that in air quotes, by the U.S. government. This was, a lot of it was unorganized territory. We see Mexico was involved, Oregon Territory, Texas, but a lot of this land was lived on for centuries, if not thousands of years, by Native American people. And now they were standing in the way of this manifest destiny to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Manifest Destiny arose in the 1840s when the majority of the United States was east of the Mississippi River. So most people lived over here in this area that's white. And this is majority of U.S. citizens lived here. Of course, we know Native people had lived here for thousands of years. And C, Manifest Destiny inspired President James J. Polk to embrace the idea of territorial expansion. So as a president, that's the platform he ran on. I am going to make sure America goes from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And America liked that idea, or at least the men, white men, that could vote at the time. So this is the United States in 1840, a larger look. We can see that territories claimed by the United States and some states are here in white. Unorganized territory, meaning there's really no idea of who really owns this quite yet, or what they can do with it. Largely occupied by Native Americans. Mexico laid claim to the land here. And this was Texas, which we'll see James J. Polk had something to do with, and this is called Oregon Territory up here. So, Roman numeral 3, the Louisiana Purchase. So we got to go and rewind a little bit, because this is a big idea. Under President Thomas Jefferson, the U.S. purchased land from France. At the time, the territory was all called Louisiana. We can see it here in yellow. And this was for $15 million, and it was in 1803 that Thomas Jefferson made this purchase. And he purchased it from Napoleon Bonaparte because Napoleon was desperate for money because he was fighting wars all over the place and needed to fund his wars. So he sold us this large chunk of land in yellow. A lot of that was that unorganized territory here. It's from that Louisiana Purchase. Parts of Minnesota, as you can see, are in the Louisiana Purchase. Westward expansion, Roman numeral 4. So under President Polk alone, here's where I'm going to make my claim that he's the most influential president. This is the starter to each one of the subtopics. A, the U.S. absorbed Texas. So Texas broke free from Mexico some years earlier. Now the U.S. absorbed it and made it into part of the United States. It's down here, 1845. Uppercase B, under President Polk alone, the United States secured Oregon Territory from the British. That's in 1846. That's up here. And so Britain had that territory, but in 1846, Polk was able to get it. Uppercase C, under President Polk alone, the United States was able to acquire New Mexico, California, and Arizona from Mexico, and that's during the War of Mexican Secession. That's in 1848, so there was actually a war, and that's where they got this territory that's kind of a cream color here. So, Polk got Texas, Oregon, and through war got Mexican secession in 1848. That's all during his presidency, is what I am touching with the cursor now, and Thomas Jefferson got that in 1803. This is more land than what Jefferson was able to purchase in 1803. Pretty influential guy, especially if you live in those territories. Or if you're of native descent, that really changed your life quite a bit, because that was part of that manifest destiny, that this would then be land that the U.S. government would want, for the most part, its white citizens moving into. Roman numeral 5, westward expansion equals patriotism. So to be a patriot or to be a real American citizen, you had to believe in moving westward. Well, the U.S. government and a lot of white Americans, that's what's going to start each one of the subtopics. A, wish to spread their vision of democracy west. And this did not include women, because women couldn't vote at the time, or people of color, who were either enslaved for the most part, or they were Native American and were in the way. So this vision of democracy, they wanted to have it spread from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but it didn't include everybody. This democracy was very limited, mainly just to white males. The U.S. government and a lot of white Americans wanted to remove or exclude those people who did not fit their vision of America. And we see the Trail of Tears here, which is the Cherokee being removed from their native lands or their traditional land, and Native people did not fit the vision of what America was. Uppercase C, the U.S. government and a lot of white Americans did not think American Indians were fit to govern themselves. They did not think that they could function within this new American democracy. And as a result, they began to set up ways or governments for them, or simply remove them or put them onto reservations after war, or as part of treaties, which we will see. And that happened to hundreds and hundreds of Native American tribes. And the U.S. government and a lot of white Americans regularly displaced or moved American Indians from the lands they lived upon for thousands of years. And this is an example of that from the Trail of Tears. The Cherokee moving out of their native lands in the southeast and into places like Oklahoma, where they would move westward. And this displacement happened here in Minnesota as well, with the Dakota, who were completely removed from the state, as we will find out. When you return tomorrow, you will have a pop quiz on this information. All right, thank you for listening.